Hello, everyone. Russ of Aquarimax Pets here with Jesse Greene from Shapes in Nature. Welcome, Jesse.
Hey, what's up?
I'm excited to talk to you again. I should say welcome back, since you've been a guest on the channel several times already.
I guess so, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about how to keep aquatic insects as pets. We want to do kind of a guide this time so that anyone who is thinking of doing it can come here and get all the information they need to get started. And since you've been doing this for a number of years now, I thought this would be a great fit. So how long have you been doing this, aquatic insect?
I want to say I started like early 2021 when I really started. I mean, I've kept aquatic bugs before, but not as extensively as I am now.
Okay.
So I've just been doing a lot of research for it, and we're still doing so much research for it.
Right.
I mean, Peter's done a bunch of research on dirted tanks and having no filters involved and having it just be fully bioactive, what's really great about it is that with these bugs, with fish, you have a lot of waste. And so it can be kind of hard to do that. But with
Right.
these bugs, the waste isn't as extreme. And so everything just kind of gets eaten up pretty
Right.
much.
And they're also less sensitive to like dissolved waste products in the water too,
Yes.
which is nice. So to get started, someone wants to set up an insect aquarium. How do they set it up? What kind of substrate could they use?
I mean, it really just kind of depends. You can you can go to like a Petco or whatever and buy, different soils like stratum, and there's a few other ones that you can do that are for fully bioactive tanks. But we've recently found that you could just do regular soil and put a layer of like a good inch layer of sand on top of that, so it stays. The soil doesn't come through the sand, and it'll stay just fine and hold just fine. So you don't need some. And in fact, I think Peter was saying that it's kind of recommended to just use more of a regular soil. You can get kind of a mixture of soil, but as long as you have that sand on top, it'll keep it compressed and kind of keep it, what is it, anaerobic? Is that what it's called?
Right, or at least anoxic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's basically you can be as simple or as complex as you want to with the substrate.
Yeah.
I have a bare bottom, and I've done a few bare bottom aquatic insect tanks, and then I have my main 20-gallon is it's just aquarium gravel, like an inch or so of aquarium gravel. You can do that too. So you have a lot of different directions to go. The benefits of the dirted tanks you have can really help plant growth. It can help establish, like you're saying, a more bioactive system with very low maintenance. So it just kind of depends on which direction you want to go, I guess.
I mean, yeah, you don't necessarily have to have a bioactive tank for any of these insects. It's not like these insects are requiring oxygen out of the water or anything like that. So it's really not, but it's entirely up to you. Like I've been using gravel quite a bit, but as opposed to sand, and you could still use gravel, but apparently a lot of the microorganisms, things like ostracods, do a lot better in sand than they do in gravel because they can get stuck or lost, or they can't reach the nutrients that is falling into the bottom of the tank because of the gravel. It's falling in between the gravel and they can't get to it. So I've sort of been switching up what I want to do, and I've sort of been wanting to go with sand and just to try it out. But you still want to have a lot of rocks in the tank. You definitely want to have rocks in your tank because a lot of these bugs, either whether they're going to lay eggs in those rocks or a lot of the big diving beetles, they actually, if you've probably seen it, they get kind of a weird film on their elytra sometime, and they'll rub it off on rocks.
So they need some rocks in there. And then,
but you don't necessarily need pebbles. You don't need like gravel.
You just need some bigger, flatter rocks so that they can rub on them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as far as other decor, kind of just up to whatever.
Anything. I mean, really, any kind of decor that's works for an aquarium. I want to get a really big tank. That's like my main goal. I just want to have room in my house, but I want to get like 125 gallon, and I want to have like a full on like spaceship crashed into the water and then have all the weird little alien bugs swimming around,
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome. Cool. That's gonna be awesome. And then One important thing for most of these tanks, can you tell us about haul out areas? Like what do you tend to use for a haul out area?
A haul out area?
Yeah, just like to keep, so they have a place to leave the water.
Oh yeah. I use. I mean, you could use a few things. I've actually been wanting to sort of do in a way, paludarium setups,
Hmm.
where you bring a little bit of land to the top. But if you don't have a lot of space in your tank, you have like a little 5 gallon or whatever, just use cork bark. Cork bark
Hmm.
floats. You can use water lettuce. Water lettuce works really well. A lot of the smaller bugs, especially, will get on top of the water lettuce
Yeah.
um, just
And
fine.
I use both of those. I use a cork bark, and then I have water lettuce in there. I also have a piece of I think it's mopani wood that juts up
Mhm.
out of the water too. So I've got like 3 different options for the bugs to use, and really it's really nice. It adds an extra dimension of interest because you see the bugs using it. But of course, a lot of them need that too. They need to be able to leave the water and rest and things like that
Right.
too. So, and
Well, yeah, that's definitely. I mean, they have to have a source. Pretty much all these bugs, which is why a lot of people ask, well, what do you do? Don't all these bugs fly? Yeah, pretty much every single one of these insects can fly, and so you need to have a proper lid, especially if you're going to have things where they can get out on top of the water, because they will try to fly towards the aquarium light, which they do every now and then. Not
right,
often though. I mean, some of them more than others, but
it's not as often as I would think, but I have seen them
yeah,
try.
it happens.
And so a tight
And it's
fitting
good
lid
to
is
have a
good.
lid
And
just in case.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And I put screen in the back because there's that little gap. So
yep.
I put window screening back and kind of put the lid on top of it so there's no real gap for them to get out in the back. So that can
Yeah,
be
I'm
good.
really excited. I'm transforming my 30 gallon into a fully just dirted tank with no filter. I'm going to try to make it just fully bioactive. Um, as long as I have enough snails and different, amphipods in there of some sort, whether it's or some kind of crustaceans. I don't know. I guess I could probably put both Daphnia and ostracods in there. Would probably be fine.
Yeah, yeah. I've had tanks with both of them in them before.
Yeah.
No problem with that. Yeah, sometimes I think the ostracods are nice because they'll eat stuff that's not suspended. The Daphnia tends to eat the things that are suspended in the water column, and the ostracods will go after the things that aren't more. So
That
they
aren't.
kind of
Yeah.
balance each other out a little bit, which is nice. So we talked a little bit about water lettuce as a plant that works. I think the water lettuce that you use came from the start that I sent. Is that right?
Oh yeah. That's that stuff grows like a beast.
Yeah, yeah. It is great. The only thing is you have to thin it out once in a while. But
Yeah. Or you can get a giant water scavenger beetle. That'll thin it out for you. Get a couple of
yes,
those.
yep. And I do have one of those. I love it. It's great. Thanks again for sending that. It's such a fun creature when it comes out of the leaves of the on the bottom of the tank or something. It's just this huge beetle. It dwarfs everything else. It's pretty cool. So other
Right.
plants that you've tried that you've had success with?
As far as floating plants, no, but I will say about plants. We're going to talk about plants. Uh,
Hmm.
if you have things like water scavenger beetles or any kind of scavenger beetle, whether it's Tropisternus or Borosis. Now, Borosis, I've noticed that they mostly feed on algae, and Tropisternus generally will as well. But those, I don't remember the name of the plants, but plants with like really stringy, kind of like small leaves and that are really thin and stringy, they'll
Hmm.
eat them. They'll eat right down to the root, and then it'll just float up to the top. So I use a lot of like sword fern, or not sword fern, but like sword plant. The
Oh
big
yeah, Amazon swords,
Amazon swords, stuff
Java
like that. I use
fern.
really thick leaves. Peter has a few other plants. I don't remember the name of them honestly. I'm terrible with plant names. Uh,
Mhm.
that seem to work really well. One is kind of like a really kind of fern looking one, and it's really neat, and it seems to be doing really well and holding up against any of the water scavengers. But they'll
Oh,
leave
good.
they will. Now what's kind of neat about having water scavengers or having water boatmen is
Hmm.
that if you have any decay happening on those plants, they'll eat
Hmm.
it. They literally, you don't even have to pull it out. They will eat
That's
anything that dies in there in the decay. They'll just eat it.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Sometimes it makes your plant look really ugly, but that's also, you know, like,
It's nature, right?
right.
And yeah, I've noticed I've used Anubias. I have a lot of
Hmm.
Anubias in my 20 gallon, and it works really well because it's kind of thick and tough. Java Fern can work because it's fairly tough
Yeah,
too.
Java Fern. I have a few of those.
That's a nice one. And yeah, that's mostly what I've used has been Anubias, water lettuce, Java Fern. I have a cryptocoryne in with one of my in there, but it's kind of soft, and so the giant water scavenger will nibble on it a little too much. But the other plants he mostly leaves alone, except for the ones like water lettuce that can grow so fast that it doesn't matter. And we'll eat duckweed too. So there's some duckweed in there. I'd rather not have the duckweed in there, but he does help keep it under control. He or she, I don't know, it's male or female, helps
Yeah,
keep it under control.
I didn't lift up the animal skirt, so I didn't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't-
and it doesn't matter because yeah, it's totally fine. But it's and so there's a lot of plants that can do well. You just have to keep in mind what you're keeping. Like if you do have a giant water scavenger beetle, it's probably going to nibble a lot more than some of the smaller ones will and stuff.
Oh, it was crazy when we got a bunch in one time. We got like 25 of those things in one time, and we had an entire top layer of of water lettuce on over this like really it's probably a 30-gallon tank as well at Pete's. It's a little bit lower than mine. It's probably still around the same size. It just looks longer. But that thing was filled, and I would say within like 2 weeks, those water scavenger beetles ate almost all of it.
Yeah,
Like they just devoured that stuff, which is
yeah, and
fine
so
because it really does grow really fast, especially if you have a lot of nutrients in your tank for
mhm.
plants. Water lettuce will go nuts.
Yeah,
So
which is I use it to as a nutrient sponge in my goldfish tank. And
yeah,
so I have as much water lettuce as I know what to do with. And so I just um, I get rid of it. And one of the ways I get rid of it is putting it into my tank with the water scavenger beetle. And
yeah, no, it's a good
it
way to
works
do it. And
great.
the Tropisternus will feed on it as well, but they're not as big.
Mhm.
So
So it doesn't have as much of an impact.
no, yeah, unless you got like 15 of the Tropisternus in your tank, which is possible. So
Yeah, that's
it was
true.
so
But
funny when I was cleaning out my 30-gallon. Like I was like, oh, like I don't think there's very much left in this thing. What's going on? No, there were so many bugs in there still, like just hiding, doing their thing. Like I couldn't believe it. I probably pulled out like 60 of those small water beetles at least.
oh wow.
It was nuts. And they're definitely breeding in there. There was definitely a lot. There was some larvae hanging out.
Oh
So it was
cool.
cool.
That's very cool. And it sounds like they're probably completing life cycle in some cases at least.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, they want to breed in the tank, but it depends on what you have in there. Like
Yeah.
if you have the small Lacophyllus, the little small diving beetles, like the larva is tiny. So if you have backswimmers in there, they'll
That'll
larva
munch
gets
them.
picked off pretty quick. And same
Yeah.
with like the small backswimmers. Like if you need to have some sort of thing where the baby backswimmers can kind of go hide, kind of like one
Mhm.
of those like little, what do they call it, fluvium, or what are the little like breeding boxes?
Oh, like a breeding trap or something.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, something like that. That would be the best way to make sure. I pull the little guys out and let them get a little bit bigger, and then I'll put them back in.
Once you
Uh,
see them swimming around.
yeah, because you'll get a lot. Like there's a lot of eggs that hatch, and a lot of little ones start getting picked off by the bigger ones that are in there. But if you just leave the little ones in there, they're most likely just going to get picked off by the big ones.
Okay, good to know. Let's talk a little bit about the creatures that you can keep in a tank like this. Starting with the insects and specifically the beetles, because we've mentioned a few, but let's get into that. Like, um, we have the tiny diving beetles, the medium ones, and then the giant ones. So let's talk a little bit about the beetles.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the big ones are obviously the best. I mean, there are, I think you have Thermonectis, which is probably the most popular. Thermonectis marmoratus, that's the sunburst diving beetle. I think that's everyone's favorite. I mean,
They
it's
are
just such a cool
fantastic.
beetle.
Yes.
Uh, but the thing is like the other Thermonectis, you have the golden Thermonectis, which is the Thermonectis sibley, and those are, I don't know if you have one or not. Those are actually pretty hard to find. We're trying to breed those right now, though, to get them
Oh,
in the
cool.
hobby. So
Hmm.
we got like 6 of them, and we're trying to breed them. And they're really pretty. They almost look like a banded. They're much fatter, and
Hmm.
they don't really have a full band that goes in the back. And they're a little bit more of a golden color than the bandeds
Oh,
that look very silver.
okay.
But the bandeds are like, you know, people are like, oh, you know, if you really look under the lighting at the banded diving beetles, I think they're awesome. They have this really cool silver. They have a really neat, like, different, like, a lot of them have different patterns on the back of them where the stripe is, the black band. Some look
Mhm.
like an M, some are kind of A shaped or V shaped, some are just straight across.
Some of them remind me of like Charlie Brown's sweater or shirt or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Cricket.
pretty cool. I like those. I really like the banded ones too. And then there's the ones that are just pure black, and they're awesome as
Yeah,
well.
so that's Rontus, and you have Rontus atricolor, which is this pure black ones there. And see, those are really cool too. I call them jet black diving beetles because they're just like a really cool black, like all the way
Yeah.
through, like their entire body. And they're bigger. They're bigger than Thermonectus too,
Hmm.
which is really cool. And then you have Rontus gudicolus, and there's like
Hmm.
two different color forms of those. I've noticed there's a gold one, and they're like really gold colored under a light. And then there's ones that have a gold border with the black elytra.
Oh yeah, I
There,
think you sent some of both of those to me.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, those are cool.
I didn't
And then
know if that was signs of sexual dimorphism, but I don't think so. I don't think it is. I
it
think there's
is.
just different color morphs of them.
Oh, okay, cool. And then you've got the really tiny beetles. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, most of them are going to be under Lacophyllus, which
Mhm.
are just they're just small predaceous diving beetles, and there is like I think I think we probably have we just sell them as a mix because there's just so many of them. We
Yeah.
do once the hobby gets a little bit better, we'll probably separate out by species eventually.
Hmm.
Um, they're really easy to breed. Like they can breed. So all the larger diving beetles, like pretty much all of them, except for irides, which I haven't sent you one of those yet because they only come out during a certain time of year.
Hmm.
Um, they're really cool too. They have this kind of curved elytra at the very end,
Oh,
and they're silver, and I call them silver bullets. Yeah, they're really cool,
cool.
and they breed really fast. Like that, literally within like 5 weeks, I think they go from like egg to adult. Like they're
Wow.
yeah, but I think they only live like a year. Like the other ones, all the other ones, like the Rantus, the Thermonectus, they all live up to 3 years,
Hmm.
which is
Which is awesome. That's a pretty
pretty
good
awesome
lifespan
for
for
an
an
insect.
insect. Yeah.
And even the Lacophyllus, the little ones, those ones can live up to 3 years. The little guys.
And will they
Um,
breed in the tank too? You're saying?
Yeah, so they'll breed in water. So all the big ones, Rantus and Thermonectus, you have to have land for that in some like sandy substrate for them to
Hmm.
lay their eggs in, and then the larvae crawl out and get into water. But the little guys, they just lay their eggs in rocks, like in rock crevices,
Hmm.
and you'll see the little bitty larvae swimming around. It's really fantastic. It's literally just a tiny diving beetle larvae. It looks just like a Thermonectus larvae, but just like a fraction of the size.
Much, much smaller. That is cool.
It's neat,
So,
yeah.
and then the giant scavenger beetles, I guess we talked a little bit about those too.
Yeah, so
Um,
scavenger beetles also will breed in water. I don't know. I haven't tried breeding the hydrophilus or hydrophilus, whatever you want to call it. Those are the
mhm.
giant water scavengers. I'm pretty sure they also just breed in water. I know that Tropicernus does,
Cool.
um, and the Barosis does as well. And they're just a very different beetle. Like that's the thing with predaceous diving beetles. They're your they're going to be a little bit more aggressive. They're going to feed on things, but they don't really feed on other live aquatic insects as long as they're living and moving and too fast for them.
Hmm.
Now I guess there is the giant diving beetle, which is I think Cybister is the genus for them.
Hmm.
I've never seen them down here. I've never had them, but I've seen videos of them, and apparently they can be pretty aggressive to even like other living things.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, I think people call them like frilled diving beetles or something like that. Some people call them that, and they're big. They're like the size of a hydrophilus.
Okay.
They're like
Nice
the
big
size of a
one.
giant water scavenger beetle.
Cool.
So yeah, I eventually I would like to get some of those, and I'd like to also get some East Coast species of the Thermonectus that you can find. You get ones that are like tiger striped. They're super cool.
Oh,
They're on
nice.
the East Coast. I need them.
Yeah, those sound fantastic. And
Yeah,
then
yeah, it'd be cool.
There are the whirligig beetles too.
Yeah, so
we
you
talked
got
about the beetles.
whirligigs, and I don't know their breeding pattern yet. I'm still kind of learning that one.
Mhm.
But you have the big ones and the small ones. And recently, did you put the two together?
I did, and it didn't work out too well. The little ones disappeared pretty fast for me.
Yeah, they tend to do fine in the wild, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that they would do fine in a smaller enclosure together.
Hmm.
And so I pretty much we kind of went back and forth. We kind of tried a couple things out, but the little ones just seem to kind of be disappearing. And it makes sense because the big ones, they're just like wolves, man.
They
They'll
are.
just constantly eat. And so
And
I feel like if you don't keep them incredibly well fed, like feed those things daily, they're just going to pick off whatever they can.
yeah, and I dump fruit flies in there all the time when they're after them. They go, they're little pigs. And just for those of you who are not familiar with whirligig beetles, they're adapted to swimming on the surface of the water. And the genus is a small one. They're like maybe a quarter of an inch long or so. You know, they vary, but something like that. And then the Dinutus are like much bigger, like the size of a pumpkin seed or so.
But they're both
And
shaped the same, which is really
yeah,
cool.
and they're both very adapted for being on the surface of the water. They both have raptorial forelegs, and they'll just grab like little insects that fall into the water and just
And they have
munch.
eyes on top of the water and eyes below the water.
I love
Like
that.
nothing can sneak up on these things except for us. But
Yeah. But when they see you coming too, they'll dive under
no,
the
they
water
know.
right away.
Yeah, they'll start doing their thing like immediately as soon as you start
Yeah.
walking by.
When
I
I
think
go by the tank to do that.
that's what's so fun about having those though. Is it's so hit or miss because like I think the big ones are still my favorite, but what's cool about the little ones is you can have more of them in the tank,
Mm-hmm.
and they create way more patterns. They tend to be a little bit more sporadic, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's really fun to watch them kind of scoot around and do their thing. But it really I would say you get either or. Get either the big ones or the small ones,
Right.
or have two
What I
different
want to
tanks.
do, yeah, what I want to do eventually is have separate tanks so that I can have some of the small ones and some of the large ones because they're both really cool in different ways, and it
Right.
doesn't look like it's very feasible to keep them both together. And let's talk about the true bugs too that you can keep. Like some of the things you guys have sent me, giant water bug, which was awesome. It recently passed away, but I had it for quite a while. I mean, they don't live all that long, but
They live about a year, I want to say.
yeah. And so it probably just died of natural causes because it was not that long ago, and I had it for quite a while. So, but they're fantastic. I mean, these big predaceous things, they're like with their raptorial forelegs, and they have the piercing mouth because they're a true bug, and they can fly. I had one surprise me at a bus stop once.
When I was in California, I remember we stopped at this like gas station, and there was a light, like kind of like a road, like some kind of like lamp post.
The street
And I
lamp or
like
something.
looked over and I just saw these massive things just like flying and landing and flying, and I was like, "What is this?" And I got over there, and it was like hundreds of not 100, it was a lot. It was like 30 of those things flying around this light.
Oh wow!
And I was
Yeah.
just like, okay, of course, I'm like super excited. My mom's like, "You're not bringing any of those in the car," and I'm like, "No, I have to." Like, are you kidding me? There's a million of them. But
Yeah.
yeah, those
Oh,
things are
pretty
cool.
cool.
I had one, I think, for like 15 months once
Mm-hmm.
as an adult.
That's pretty good. Yeah. And those you would not keep in a tank with other bugs because they eat them.
No, apparently, I don't know. Apparently, people have kept diving beetles with them. I just don't see how that would work.
Yeah.
Those things could eat anything. I'm one of those can easily catch a giant water scavenger and eat one of those, no problem.
Yeah. And I was feeding mine superworms, crickets, guppies, that kind of thing, and it was munching them.
Yeah.
So then there's the ferocious water bugs. I still have my ferocious water bug that you sent, and they're like
I think
almost
they
like
live a little
smaller
longer.
version. Okay, yeah. I mean,
I think
mine's
they
doing fine.
overwinter.
Oh, okay, so hopefully I'll have mine through the winter and into the warmer season. They're a lot smaller, but they're a similar body structure. And we got the
They're the
creeping
same
water
way, and
bug.
you don't want them in one of your tanks with a bunch of different stuff because they will
Right.
eat a lot of it.
Yeah, I just
they're
have it
pretty
in its own tank because I didn't want to risk that. I remember talking to you about it, like, oh yeah, it's gonna go by itself. And then there's the creeping water bugs. You sent me a creeping water bug, and that's communal. You can keep that with other stuff.
It's probably still alive in your tank. I bet you probably just haven't
Probably.
seen it in a while.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while, but it's probably still there.
Oh yeah, when I sorry, when I was cleaning out my 30-gallon, I thought the two of mine that I put in there were dead. I found them both. They were fine.
Really?
Yeah, they were just doing their
Awesome.
thing.
Yeah,
They're cool.
hopefully.
I think creeping water bugs are like, I just like their shape and their color. I just think they're really pretty. There's
They're
apparently
very
there's
cool
another
looking.
species down here that's like jet black with red eyes,
Ooh.
and I need to find it. Yeah,
That would be
I
really
need to
cool.
find it.
Yeah, yeah. Next time I come down, find some.
Yeah, let's look for them. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
there's
they're really cool. I mean, they could possibly capture water boatmen, and they could possibly capture backswimmers, but you know, it's there. If you throw like bloodworm in there, or you know, Daphnia or scuds, they're going to go after that stuff mostly.
yeah, that makes sense. And what about the water striders?
Water striders, yeah, they you know, the thing with most of the hemipterans is they just don't have a long lifespan. Water striders are one of the same. Like water striders, they'll live about 5-6 months maybe. Backswimmers are 4 months, sometimes 6, depending on, you know, just sometimes they'll live a little longer. But the cool thing about all those is that they will lay eggs in your tank. So
Mm-hmm.
you just got to have a lot of things with grooves in hiding spots they can lay eggs in. Otherwise, you know, if they just lay their eggs on a rock on the outside, some
Something's gonna
corrosive
get
or
after it.
diving beetle will just eat it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so
That makes sense. But it's cool that they can breed in. And would you keep water striders with the smaller diving beetles? I mean, the smaller whirligig beetles.
yeah, they tend to do fine. I mean, sometimes I'll see a water strider try to go after a little Girinus, but it doesn't happen. They don't have the Girinus are too sleek and fast.
Okay, because I want to try a tank with both of those. I think that'd be fun. And
Yeah,
then,
they would do water striders are really fun. They're really cool. I like them. They're good climbers.
mhm.
Some of them can climb glass. I'm not kidding you. I've seen it. And they also
Yeah.
fly. A lot of people don't realize that, but they do have wings and they can fly. And they will if they get the opportunity to escape.
Yeah.
When I first got them, I didn't have a very secure lid. I had like kind of like I didn't put the mesh on the back area, and they were just getting out left and right. Like they would just climb right up that little like pole thing
Slip
there and
through.
just fly out.
Yeah, I had a similar experience when I was a kid, and I collected a bunch of them, and they ended up one climbed up my leg, it got out, climbed up my leg, and bit me on the leg. Um, so I learned my lesson.
It
Yeah,
was
they
never
can
the
get
same
out.
that day. No kidding. No, like, you still have PTSD from it.
It was a noticeable bite.
I found a bunch of creeping water bugs one time in somewhere we were at, and I saw a bunch and I picked one up because I wanted to look at it, and that thing packed a little bite. That was a shock, man. That was one heck of a bite. That little bitty thing. I was like, okay, you know, I've been bit by a toe biter. I've been bit by the big giant
Yeah,
water
me
bug.
too.
That sucks. That is not a good feeling.
No, no, it's not.
That's a painful bite. I mean, ferocious too. They can leave a nasty bite as well. What's funny
Yeah.
is I've been bit by large back swimmers before, but
Mhm.
like I've picked up so many of them here. I've never been bit by one here, which is weird because I know I've been bit by them in the pool all the time. Like they'd bite my leg, they'd land on my
Can
leg and
bite, yeah.
bite, you know. And so like I know, you know, people be like, oh, I get bit by back swimmers all the time. I hate them. I'm like, yeah, you know, what's weird is I agree that they can bite, but like I've never been bit by a single one here. Like it's weird. I've helped hundreds of them here, and
Hmm. Wonder
I've
what's the
given up
difference.
caring if they bite now. I'm just like, you know, I'll take the
Not
risk.
likely to happen. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's interesting. Back
Well.
swimmers are really cool for a tank because they take up a different portion. Well, the small ones do at least. They take
Yeah.
up that middle portion, that middle layer of your tank, which is what's really cool about insects is you have all these different layers, right? You have the top layer, and you're going to have bugs that are going to be resting on the top layer that are, you know, that are going to be on the cork bark or the water lettuce and stuff. And then on top of that, you have the whirligigs on the top area that kind of to cover that region, or the water striders, and then right below that you could get the larger back swimmers will hang out at the very top usually, but I don't put large back swimmers in mine because they'll eat any of the small things. They'll eat any of them, and they'll pull Giranus too. They can grab Giranus occasionally as well.
Yeah,
but they're cool. Like if you have a tank that's mainly just like larger things, like larger beetles, larger scavenger beetles, then they're fine in there.
Oh, okay.
If you're putting Lacophyllus in there, they'll pick them off one by one.
Those. Yeah. Well, the small back swimmers that you sent, the first time we tried it a couple times, I guess, and they arrived fine. They were healthy when they arrived, but then after a day or two, I didn't have any anymore. But this last batch that you sent, they're doing well.
Yeah, I don't know what that was about. Like I've had mine in here for like this little tank here, this little 5-gallon. There's there's pretty much the same number I put in there.
Yeah, and the ones that the difference for me, and this may have something to do with it, I need to figure out what it is in my 20-gallon tank that is not hospitable for them, because I changed out the filter a couple different times trying to fix it, and I still had a problem the last time, even though all I have in there now is a sponge filter. But this most recent time that you sent them, I just put them in a tank by themselves, no aeration, no filtration, no substrate, just some cork bark, some water lettuce. They're doing great.
Yeah, I don't know what it is or why. Like, I know Peter disagrees with me on this because he doesn't think that's the problem. But as soon as I put duckweed in my tank, my back swimmers started dying. As soon as I put that stuff in there. This tank has no duckweed in it. I have several different diving beetles in there, and they're doing just fine.
Okay. Well, it's an interesting thing. We'll keep experimenting and trying to figure out what's going on. But so far, so good. They've been eating Daphnia. I've changed the water. I'll use my water changer set and just take some water off the bottom with whatever detritus is there on the bottom, and then I feed them Daphnia, and they're doing well. They're so excited.
They love ostracods and Daphnia. Like I put like probably 100 ostracods in this little tank back here, and I don't see any ostracods in the tank now. Like I'm pretty sure they just picked all those things clean. Yeah, they were just like, oh, thanks. I don't know if I've seen back swimmers in duckweed before in the wild, so I don't know if that's really the problem. I just don't know why. Yeah. That was just the only correlation I had between they were thriving just perfectly fine in my tank, and then when I put that stuff in there and they like covered the full top. It's only when the duckweed is like covering the full, covering that maybe they're just not getting oxygen properly or something.
Might be harder for them to poke up through and get
poke up through. Could
make sense. Well, let's talk about some other things that are not insects that can go in the tank. Other creatures like mollusks.
Well, you missed one really cool hemipteran, though.
Oh, let's talk about it.
The Renatra, the water scorpions.
Oh, yes.
They're amazing. Like
they are.
You can put them with larger diving beetles. They'll leave those alone. They won't really be able to eat them. But they will get Lacophyllus, and they'll eat all the small back swimmers. Like they'll just perch and wait, But you can keep those communally together. Like you can keep like 30 water scorpions in one tank, and they won't bother each other.
Is that only when they're adults, or was that any time, like any size?
As long as they're relatively the same size. They probably, if some are just barely smaller, I don't think they would attack them. But if they're like babies, like if they're like little nymphs, I'm sure that they would feed on the nymphs if they could. And it's the same way with if you have adult abetus, which are the ferocious, but the water scorpions are way better than abetus as far as communal together. Like they just don't hurt each other at all. They don't even try. Like the ferocious water bugs, even as adults, they'll kind of go after each other sometimes. They're just not successful because they're both like the same size. But the water scorpions do just fine. Like I've kept several together for a year, and they've never hurt each other. So
I think that would be a cool setup where you just have like half a dozen in like a 5-gallon tank or something.
And then you just throw a bunch of back swimmers in there and just know that their fate is sealed. Like it wouldn't stand a chance. It's kind of mean. I don't know. It's almost cruel.
Will the water scorpions go after bloodworms?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
frozen
they've done it.
buffaloes?
You
Yeah.
know, or you could just feed them by hand. I mean, people, you could just take forceps and put a fly or a cricket, and they'll just grab onto it.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, they're super
I
cool.
generally use backswimmers since we have like such a big supply of them.
No, that makes sense. They're such a cool thing. They remind me of an elongated. I mean, even though they're not closely related to mantis because they're hemipterans, but they seem like a mantis in so many ways.
They're literally like a cross between a mantis and a stick bug,
Yeah,
and they live underwater.
yeah, they're super cool. So I got some when I was out in 21, and we caught some with you guys. Couple of them in that like there was like a roadside puddle. There was a bunch of them in there, and we caught a couple, and I kept them for quite a while. They're very cool, very cool.
Yeah, no, I think that they are, and for me, like it just depends on what you kind of want to have for your tank, right? So
Yeah,
if you have a really big tank, like if you have something in the 50-gallon range, putting a water scorpion in there among all the other stuff you have, like if you have like, you know, 30 backswimmers, I think it's probably fine because it's
right,
not going to get every single one of them, you
right.
know.
Especially if you're target feeding it.
The big thing about having a water scorpion is you need to make sure that you have a lot of open space for things like backswimmers so they can kind of
Mhm,
congregate in that open space. And because
mhm,
if they don't have anywhere to hide like that, because the water scorpions, they'll just chill, on any of the ledges. So any of the big leaves you have in there, and they'll chill
mhm.
under the cork bark, any of the rocks. So if you don't have any kind of escape for the backswimmers, they'll pick it they'll they'll pick every single backswimmer off one by one. I mean, they'll get
Yeah.
them eventually.
So you need to kind of manage the. They need to have kind of a refuge area where there's not cover for the water scorpions where they can hang out.
Right. I mean, if you can establish like a good colony of backswimmers, if you can figure out getting some kind of breeding system going to where it doesn't matter, then it's not that it would be kind of easy. I mean, that's, we just have these big cattle tanks in Peter's yard that they just thrive in there, they just breed in there like crazy. So it's not really a problem for me to feed them backswimmers.
Yeah, if you're producing that many, that's awesome. Do they produce all year, or do they slow down a lot in the winter?
They definitely, well, they if you don't keep them warm, as long as you keep them warm, they'll breed throughout the year. But once the sub freezing temperatures hit in, those eggs will go dormant, and the adults will just freeze, and then you won't see them.
So it's the eggs that survive the winter. The adults don't overwinter.
Yeah, yeah, the eggs will survive throughout the winter. I'm sure they're chilling in some leaves and whatnot.
So yeah, I'm really excited that the backswimmers are doing so well, and I'm hoping to get them to breed and stuff in their little tank, and then I'm going to start trying to see if I can get them in that other tank going. But I'll have a reserve population. So
Yeah, that would be really great. They should breed pretty well. Like I said, you just need to have. I mean, if they're by themselves, it's not so important. But putting a lot of foliage in there, a lot of different leaves and stuff, so they can lay their eggs. But I bet they'll lay their eggs just fine on the roots of the water lettuce and stuff as well.
okay, I do have some water lettuce in with them, so for that it'll work
Right.
out. So what kind of snails do you keep with your in your aquatic insect tanks?
I have ram's horn snails, but
That's what I
you
have
can
too.
keep. Yeah, you can keep any snail you want. I just um, I had some of those. What are those? Just like invasive brown snail or whatever that thing is. They just
Oh,
breed like crazy.
the little football shaped ones,
Yeah,
the bisa. Yeah, I think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
bisa.
Those things are just so invasive. So I don't recommend them anytime because you're just breeding a population of them. But then I got pond leeches in my tank,
Mm-hmm.
and those snails, they didn't stand a chance. Like those things kept the population in check so well. And I loved my leeches while they were around, and they would breed in the tank too. I would see all these little tiny ones chilling out
Really?
too. It was really, really cool. But they weren't; those would get eaten often. The big diving
Mm-hmm.
beetles, like they would see a little one of those things just chilling on the edge of the glass, and they just go up and just munch it down, which is
Munch it
great
down.
because it kind of kept all of everything in check.
Yeah.
But it'd be really cool because you have this big leech, and all on its belly, you would just see it look like it was just kind of creepy. It'd be all these weird little babies just chilling on the belly of it for a while, and they would all kind of disperse. It was gnarly. I loved it.
Oh, that is cool. So
yeah, I know. I wanted to. I wish I'd kept. Well, I still have one or two of them, but that's something that we're considering selling as well.
Keep the snails in control.
And well, leeches. Yeah, I mean, it's a cool bug. I mean, like,
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, oh, leech. The ones that are these little pond leeches don't feed on humans. They feed on slugs and snails. And
right, so you don't have to worry about putting your hand in the tank and coming out with a leech sucking on you.
It was a leech. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And I've thought about this because I have ram's horns in mine too, and they tend to breed, not as bad as like the physas, but they breed quite a bit. And I'm wondering, thought about putting an assassin snail in there, but I haven't done it.
Oh, that's cool.
But I've bred assassin snails before, and they're pretty cool. So I thought about maybe just getting one and then rotating it between tanks when I need to thin the ram's horn population out. I don't know. I'll think about that. But they're not hard to breed either. But then
I've never kept assassin snails.
They're cool, but they do completely destroy snails. If you get them breeding, you can have however many hundreds of snails in the tank, and they'll eventually take them all out.
Interesting, huh? Yeah, I want to do a paludarium setup because I want to get some like semi-aquatic isopods.
Oh yeah,
which would be really cool. There's a lot of really neat ones.
There are.
Also, like,
oh, go ahead.
Well, no, what were you going to say about the isopods?
I've even kept fully aquatic ones.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Do you have any?
I don't have any right now, but I have. And in fact, they were the first isopods I ever kept when I was like 13. I found some in an irrigation canal, collected them, put them in a fish tank, and they were breeding for me. And then I put like newts in it or something, and they ate them all. But they're pretty cool. So I'm going to see if I can maybe collect, because I know some spots where I could collect some and add those, because I think they'd be a cool addition.
That would be. We want those real bad. We would love to get a colony of those going.
Yeah, they're super cool. And then
speaking of isopods, we have a colony going. You'll be happy about this. Of the they look just like powder blues. They're called blue flower or something.
Oh yeah, the flowery blues. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have Gloria.
Yeah. We have I found I collected an entire colony of those things.
So I think I remember you sent me a message about that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we'll have to send you some sometime.
That would be cool. Yeah, that's a great species to have.
How are your what are those? The leeches, the desert adapted ones doing?
They're breeding.
Yeah, dude, those things. I can't believe it. I can't believe how many. I don't. I think those things live on oxygen. I don't. Yeah, I don't even know, man.
Yeah, those are super cool. I'm excited to get more of those, and I think they'll be great in the hobby, especially for bioactive desert setups, because they're so good at.
They're hardy.
Yeah.
They're great.
They're so cool, and they look a little bit longer than most leeches too. A little bit, like a more elongate body, a little bit
instead of as round.
Yeah, not quite as round, but they just it took them a little while to get started, but once they did, I mean, they're breeding, so I'm not too worried now.
Yeah, well, now that they've started, I'll tell you right now, you're going to get a lot, because that's what happened to us. It was I collected 10. And I think within 5 months, it was just we have over 100 of these things. It was just yeah. And, they don't sell as well as I thought they would. But I think they're a fantastic isopod. I think they're cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the fact that they're so desert adapted, I think we need to get that more. They need to be more popular.
Yeah. So, I mean, they put them in desert beetle tanks too.
Yeah, I should try putting some in my desert beetle tanks. So there's other crustaceans. We've got amphipods or scuds. And I have those in my tanks. I think there are not as many as there used to be because the beetles are eating some of them, which is okay.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they go crazy. But I have a tank that's just for breeding scuds, so I can always add some more if I need to.
Right.
But for those of you who are familiar with amphipods, they're crustaceans actually fairly closely related to isopods, but instead of being dorsally flattened, they're laterally compressed. And there are a lot more aquatic ones. There are some terrestrial species, but most of them are aquatic. And
Yeah, isn't when you go to the beach, like what, a sand flea?
Sand fleas are a type of amphipod.
Those little
and
bastards.
yeah, those can be kind of annoying. But
yeah.
There's in Florida, they call them, I think, lawn shrimp. There's like a
Mhm.
fully terrestrial type of amphipod that just lives in soil and shows up in grass and everything, and just it hangs out there. And people sell them as cleanup crews for terrestrial.
Oh, I bet they're great.
Yeah.
We got this other. We got tons of them, and they kind of look like Daphnia.
Mm-hmm.
They're like I don't know what they are. You probably do. They almost look. I think Pete sent you a video of them.
Oh yeah, yeah. And they're definitely, I'm not sure which genus they are, so they may not be in the genus Daphne, but they are the same group as Daphne.
Right. They didn't. We collected a bunch, and they didn't do very well. So I don't know. But maybe we just need to try it again in a different tank setups.
Could be. The one thing about those is that some of the ones you'll collect in vernal pools and things are very adapted to certain temperatures or to certain times of year, and they're very seasonal. Unlike the ones I sent you guys that are doing really well now, they just, they'll go all year and they're fine. But some of them are very, very adapted to seasonality.
Okay, that's a possibility.
And stuff like that. So it could be what's going on.
The ostracods, though.
Ostracods, yeah, that's what I was going to say. We need to talk about ostracods.
Those are great. I mean, they're a great food source for most of the bugs, like, because they don't live very long. So when they die, the little beetles just go in and eat them.
Yeah.
And the backswimmers love them.
Yeah, I need to actually get a tank. I need to isolate some from my main tank and just have a breeding tank of them for my backswimmers and for the fish. Fish love them too.
Oh yeah,
and they're super easy to breed, super fast. And ostracods are also known as seed shrimp. For those of you who are not familiar with ostracods, they're very small. Most of them are small. I've seen some. I once had a species that was almost as large as like a tic tac.
Oh wow!
But that's not. Most of them are tiny. But that was pretty cool. It was a vernal pool species.
I found we need to go find them. But when we were up in the Mount Lemmon area, I found like these green ones that were probably double the size of the ones that we sent you.
Okay.
And they're cool looking. And that was the first ones I ever found of those out here. So we're gonna go find them so we can breed them.
Yeah, they're very cool. And they're useful, like you said. They're good as a cleanup crew. They're good for just a community member in a communal tank like this, and they're also good food sources for a lot of creatures. So those are fun. And that kind of brings us to feeding. We should talk more about feeding. We talked a little bit about it, but what is your feeding regimen in one of your tanks for like a week? What would you do in general?
Yeah, the thing that we've been learning a lot about feeding, especially about like the risk of overfeeding. I used to just throw like a ton of pellets in there, and then the pellets didn't get eaten. Which is rare. Like if you have a lot of bugs in your tank, like if you throw fish pellets in there, it'll all get eaten mostly. But I also started putting like algae tablets, and almost everything will feed on those. Like even the water boatman feeds on it. The Tropisternus will, all the scavenger beetles. But the large, anything's going to feed on those. The large beetles love them. Sunburst diving beetles, they love them. But the problem is that it can kind of gunk up your tank if you just throw a whole tablet in there. So I've been throwing less at a time and allowing for smaller amounts to be consumed fully before I just throw a full tablet in there. Even though it's fun to throw a full tablet in there and just watch like all 20 of the beetles just go after it at the same
time. Yeah. But it's nice to be able to just like break one up. You can break it up in like quarters and split it between tanks or whatever. And yeah. But I've noticed too, it's really I've been gravitating towards feeding smaller amounts more often of fish pellets and things like that too. They seem to that seems to work really nicely because then they clean it all up every time fast. But then you get to feed them again the next day, kind of thing. And so I've done more of feeding almost every day. And I have like you suggested, the frozen bloodworms. I use that. I use the fish pellets. Sometimes I use fish flakes or crisps. I noticed that the Dinutus whirligig beetles will actually eat fish flakes.
Yep.
They'll like take a bite of a pellet maybe and then drop it, but the flakes they will just munch down, which is nice.
They'll munch it down. However, I know that if you have a fruit fly culture and you just don't know what to do with all those fruit flies, just throw fruit flies on the top there for your Diniutis, man. They'll just devour them.
That's my staple that I give them. That like their main food is fruit flies, because I always have, I don't know, at least half a dozen fruit fly cultures growing at any given time. And
yeah, I'll buy like a dozen crickets also, but I'll freeze them. I'll just freeze the crickets, and then I'll pull one out and let it thaw, and then I'll toss it in there and let the diving beetles go to town off of the dead bug.
Oh, the diving beetles totally love the crickets. Yeah, I've noticed that too, because I breed banded crickets, and so
yeah, and I mean you can feed them live crickets too, but I don't know. It's just after you watch them feed on them, you're like, freeze them, you know? Like,
yeah, I think that's better.
It's a little more humane, it feels like.
Well, if one of my crickets gets out, because sometimes, open the lid, and banded crickets are really better at hopping than like house crickets. So they'll leave out, and I'll swat them and then throw them in.
Yeah.
So that they're, they're dead, and then they'll just eat them. And the really small crickets, since I'm breeding them, if I get a container, I'm collecting larger crickets to feed to something else, and I have like a dozen of the tiny crickets in there, I'll just throw them in there for the Dinutus, and they'll eat those too.
Oh yeah,
they love those.
They won't stand a chance.
Yeah, they absolutely love those. And so I
found a dead centipede in my house the other day, and it was just freshly dead, and I was like, well, and I just tossed it in there, and they just went to town on it.
Oh yeah, yeah. So dead insects, small live insects, soft-bodied ones, yeah. Daphnia, I feed Daphnia to mine, especially my backswimmers now. But I will just I have several colonies of Daphnia, and I'll just take a gallon jar as my small, like my emergency backup filter, just so if my other tanks crash for some reason, I have that, and I'll just dump out half of it and put that into the tank.
Right.
And so there's like 200 Daphnia in there, and they just go to town.
Yeah, that's my goal. I want to do this dirted tank idea with no filter. And the reason why, I guess we didn't really talk, we talked about it earlier, but we weren't talking about it recording. The reason why it's a good idea to maybe not have a filter for these things is because a lot of these bugs they're dealing with, what do you call it, like friction. They're affected by friction or vibration quite a bit. So a loud sounding filter could be a problem for them. It could be really distracting. I mean, I had a filter in there the whole time. They were pretty much fine. They didn't seem like it really mattered all that much. But what I like about the idea of not having a filter is it'll be a lot quieter. And so having a dirty tank with sand on the bottom, it means that all the little ostracods are going to be able to feed on all the nutrients that are falling down to the bottom. They're not going to get stuck in gravel. They'll be able to actually find the food, which is really good. So yeah, I kind of my goal is to have this just fully bioactive sort of tank where everything sort of is in balance. It has Daphnia, ostracods that are breeding, which is, I think is probably a good idea I'm going to attempt to put Daphnia and ostracods in there first and let them sort of do their thing.
So they're established.
Get established, and then start putting everything else in there. Because if you throw, you could probably throw the diving beetles in there just fine, but if you throw the backswimmers in there as soon as you throw ostracods in there,
not going to be much left.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's see what else about. We already talked about what water scavenger beetles eat. I've seen them eat fish food as well as the plants and whatnot.
Right.
The other day I saw one of the diving beetles. I can't remember which species it was. I think I have some video footage of it. He had grabbed one of the ram's horn snails and was carrying around and eating it.
Yeah, was it a little snail? They'll eat the little ones sometimes.
It was a fairly small one, yeah. So they are controlling the population to some extent.
Yeah, man. I tell you, once I got those pond leeches, I have not had a snail problem since. Like I've seen so many videos of people like, oh yeah, it's time to clean out, time to de-snail a bunch of my tank. I got to get rid of a bunch of tanks. I'm like, dude, just get pond leeches. Like you're not gonna have a problem. Like
yeah, that's tempting. I may have to do that.
It's great.
So it sounds like maintenance differs based on these various tanks. Like a dirted tank is going to be super low maintenance once you have it established.
That's the thing. Like I feel like maintenance is mostly for an aesthetic purpose. Like you don't need to really worry about water quality with any of these unless you're breeding them. Of course, if you have naiads or things that require gills, so beetle larvae in there, then maybe you're going to want to cycle your water better, make sure you have your pH levels correct and all that kind of stuff. But like, as far as these bugs, they don't care. Like, you could have toilet water in there and they wouldn't give a crap. Like, like they don't, they literally, these things are living and thriving in like the nastiest cattle tank filled with rust, like you can imagine. Like, it doesn't matter,
Right.
And
they use it as a medium to find their food and live in, but they're not breathing it. Yeah.
And in fact, if you actually have it really gunked up, they would probably prefer it. They'd be like, yeah, I can hide better,
Yeah. And plenty food.
Right. But, I think so really it depends on how much work you want to keep up on your tank for yourself. Like, do you want it to be this just like absolute spotless, like not a single bit of like algae on the side of the glass? Like, if that's what you're wanting for yourself, then then clean it as much as you want. But like, for me, I like seeing a little algae on the glass because I know that something's going to eat it and feed on it.
Right.
I don't want too much, but having a little layer of algae kind of at the bottom is kind of nice because the snails will feed on it, ostracods will feed on it, Daphnia will feed on it, all the Barosis will feed on it. So it's kind of works
keep
out.
a more natural cycle. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so water changes are kind of depending on what you're looking at. I usually do water changes about once a week, just partial, like 10, 15, 20% of the water, because I'm already doing it with all my other tanks. And it's just, I'm in the room and I'm right there.
Good for the plants that are in there too,
know. Yeah, because I'm putting fertilizer into, and so you need to do water changes when you do that.
Right.
And you don't necessarily need to fertilize depending on what you do. The dirted tanks are basically, the fertilization is coming from the waste of the animals and what's in the soil. And in my setup, I've just got aquarium gravel in there, and so I'm fertilizing to balance out the nutrients that are available from the waste that's in there. And, and that makes sense. And it makes the water lettuce go like crazy and get really big. And
in fact, speaking of like the nutrients and whatnot, going to like a local pond and just getting some like dead leaves in there and tossing it in there is actually a pretty good thing. It's going to get a lot of those microbes kind of going in your tank that are natural and really good for your tank. And so, some people are like, oh, well, you might get algae. Look, you put Troposternus in there and you put Barosis in there, you're not going to have an algae problem. Like, I mean, it might grow here and there, but like, they're going to keep that in balance pretty well. And same with like the little Daphnia, they like to feed on it too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, that having the dead leaf decay in there is actually really good because things like water boatmen and stuff will feed on it, and ostracods will lay eggs in it, and it's actually a pretty good thing to have.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's just kind of making the cycle more natural.
Yeah, someone had commented a while back, said like, yeah, well, then you're going to get mosquito larvae in there, and then what? I'm like, if you think for a second that mosquito larvae is going to survive in that tank, that's good. I'd like to see that. Like, they would, if the eggs even hatch and I get larvae, the backswimmers will take care of those real quick. Within a day.
That's the next time I find some mosquito larvae, I'm going to dump them in with the backswimmers. That'd be fun.
You won't get any mosquito larvae growing. I'll tell you that one. They won't survive.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Speaking of mosquito, have you met Larry Reeves? Do you know Larry?
Yeah,
the mosquito guy?
He was there in 21. Yeah,
that guy blows my mind. Did you watch that video that I was at Aaron's house and they had the Skeeter Eater 5000 or whatever that thing was? Did you see that video on Peter's?
I don't know if I've seen that one yet.
Dude, you will die. You have got to go see that video on his page. It's pretty hilarious. I made a commercial for him. That's all I'm going to say. You already know it's going to be ridiculous.
Yes. Something I can't miss for sure. I got to check it out.
Oh, you have to go see it. It's hilarious. But no, so he was down, I think it was 2021. I think it was the first summer we were down here. It was the first time I met him. And we were at, I don't know, like some canyon somewhere around here. And there was this like tree hollow with mosquito larvae all in it. He was like specifically looking for it, and he found a rove beetle that was chilling on the top of the bark, and then it would go down into the water and grab a mosquito larva and come back out and eat it. It was just like the craziest thing.
That. Yeah, that was so cool.
I just remember because like I was there with Larry, and he was just like, "What? What?" Just and he filmed. He got the whole thing on film. He filmed the entire thing. It was just amazing. And then the poor guy, he's a great scientist, but he's trying to catch this thing. And And I was letting him have his moment, I was like, all right, keep trying to catch it. And it'd get back in the water, he'd miss it, and we'd leave and then come back, and he kept trying to catch it. And finally, I was like, all right, it's been like a couple hours, and so I'm whittling a tool with like a blade of grass, like some primitive, and I was like, step aside, listen, let the bug collector do this. And I caught it in like 5 seconds. He was like, you could have done that the whole time. And I was like, yeah. It's so good. And I was like, listen, Larry, I'm like, this is my life. Okay, I collect bugs. Like, let the caveman do it, right? Yeah. Like, it was awesome though.
Yeah,
he kept the thing alive. That thing lived for like a year, and he
Really?
had a really neat setup for it where it was all like translucent. You could see like and it would live on this log, and it would just go in and catch mosquito larvae and feed on it. And he
That
had
is
it.
so cool.
I know. I was like, man, I need to find more of these. Like, what a cool pet, Like,
Yeah, something that gets rid of mosquitoes and is in an awesome way.
and I bet it would feed on like Daphnia too. Like, I bet it
Oh,
would
it
feed
probably
on
would.
several different things.
Yeah, you could probably find some other options. Maybe even frozen bloodworms. You never know.
I know. I always do this. I always get excited when we find like one thing like that. I'm like, dude, we got to get more of these. Like, we got to sell them. And Peter's like, we found one. Like, like, calm down, Jesse. Like, I'm like, all right. Well, if we find more, we've still only found one. So, like, it's been like 2 years, and I still have only seen one. So,
Yeah. That's
I'm not sure those will go on the site.
Yeah, it might be a while.
Yeah.
But I think we've pretty much covered breeding already to a large extent. Like some of these will just breed in the tank by themselves. Providing a land area is important for some of the larger beetles, where they can crawl out in their pupation stage is what's critical there, right?
Yeah.
They're-
Here's one thing I'll say about breeding is if you want to have a communal tank and you expect there to be like breeding going on, you want to have some sort of way to where you can either separate the small ones, because the bigger ones will eat the small ones, or what you could do is you could take out the larger ones because they've bred, they're probably not going to live much longer anyways, and then let the little ones thrive in there. You could also do that. That's also a possibility. And then let the little ones cycle, and then their life cycle, they get bigger and then they breed as well. And you can kind of keep going back and forth with that. But if you're trying to breed insects, like if you're trying to breed these aquatics, you want to keep them all separated. Like if you want to breed, if you want to have your own colony of backswimmers, then just put backswimmers in the thing like you have, let them start breeding, and then kind of go from there, and then take from there and put them in your tank, in your communal tank.
Makes sense. Kind of like you would do with a cleanup crew of isopods, and when you're putting them in with something that eats isopods, you keep a big colony, and then you periodically seed it with that. It's kind of the same model,
right? And the same goes with like the big diving beetles. You build a palindarium kind of, and you have the diving beetles. I don't know if they'll feed on their larvae or not, but I do know that if the larvae is trying to pupate and they're in your tank and they're up on like the cork bark trying to pupate, something's going to come along and eat them. They're not going to stand a chance, so you want to keep those separate from something else. Plus aquatic beetle larvae is like amazing. They're highly predaceous. They're super alien looking, so they're fine on their own anyways. Just let them do their thing.
They do look super cool and super alien. It's true.
Yeah, they're cool. I love how they swim. How they like kind of like back up. They swim backwards, kind of.
Yeah, they look almost kind of like the way their body plan is. Reminds me a little bit of a fairy shrimp almost, but not quite.
Yeah. I remember I collected what is that? What do they call it? The Dobson fly larvae, the big
big beasts. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude. I grabbed one out of the water one time thinking I'd be fine. No, that thing was just like, absolutely not. And just like latched onto my hand. I was like, okay, never mind.
Oh, those are fearsome.
Yeah, they're monsters. Yeah, they're crazy. Yeah, that's a cool bug. We're gonna get into a lot of the larvae at some point. We haven't decided whether we want to sell aquatic beetle larvae once we start breeding them. We have a lot of breeding tanks going on right now, or if we're going to sell them at the larvae stage or sell them at just as adults.
Once they become adults,
yeah.
Well, I think it's fascinating and fantastic that you're getting them breeding, and just everyone, if you want to know where to go to get them, check out bugsincyberspace.com. Both Peter and Jesse are involved with Bugs in Cyberspace, and that's where all these tanks that you're talking about are. Well, not all of them, because you have some at your house, but a lot of the dirted tanks we were talking about and stuff are over at Peter's place, and that's where Jesse, you do a lot of the shipping and stuff like that, and Peter does the emailing back and forth and maintaining the website and that kind of stuff. So
it's funny. I start recognizing names, and then someone else will be like, "Thanks, like Peter," and I'm like, "I packed that, dang it," I'm like, "Where's my thanks?" No, No, I'm kidding. I don't care, but it is funny because like, that's my handwriting on the top of that cup,
Yeah, I've noticed that sometimes I've said something to Peter about it, and he's like, "Well, Jesse packed that. That was Jesse." So
yeah. I mean, he is Bugs in Cyberspace. I guess he gets the credit. He is the one that started it all.
True, but you are part of the team too. So there you go.
That is true. I am. I'm the comic relief.
Well, I almost died laughing a couple of times when I've been out there with you guys.
Man, are you coming out next year? Tell me you're coming out next year.
I really want to. I hope so. I really want to. So I hope I can.
You should just come out when like John Skeersky comes out or something like that.
Yeah, like I did the first time.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
I mean, you have a place to stay. No big deal.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Every time I leave, I immediately think, well, when can I come back? That's
yeah.
Like,
oh yeah. No, it's so funny. Like so many people they don't really have any idea what's going on. And I'll talk to people about Skyline Adventures. And they're like, at first they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's like a bug excursion. We should be able to catch bugs. She's like, I'm horrified of bugs, but I would go do that.
Yeah, I've told people about it who are not necessarily bug people like us, but they're excited about it. They want to come do it because
it's an experience.
Yeah,
I think we're gonna do things a little different next year, but I'll let Pete explain all that because I don't want to play telephone and say something wrong. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I got to get back out there as soon as I can. So I'm hoping it'll be this next year.
Our next thing we're really going to work on is breeding triops and like clam shrimp.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we're going to just get a bunch of them, put them in just do a layer of sand on the bottom, and then have easy access to empty out the water, dry out the sand. Most likely have eggs in them.
Oh, yeah. And I've done that many times with triops. So I might have some tips. We should talk about that sometime.
Oh, yeah. No, we figured we'd come to you about that. Well, we are also thinking about just going out to Wilcox or somewhere and just scoop up some sand out there and that are like where obvious puddles were and just see if we can get them to populate anyways.
You probably could. You just need some, basically distilled water or low mineralized water and you could do it. Yeah. I mean, that's how a lot of the triops kits originally were. That's just people, they just go scoop out dirt and put it in a little envelope and sell it. So it does work. And then once you collect that initial group, you can produce your own. And I've done that, like I was saying. So we can, all you need is that initial stock and you can get it going.
Yeah, triops are so cool. Like I've had them in my tank. They don't live very long, but they're just so cool in the tank. I think I had one live for 3 or 4 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, they really don't go very long. The ones that we get here in the U.S. There's some like the Cancroformis in Europe that'll live quite a bit longer and get bigger too.
Oh, that's cool.
And they'll do lower temperatures. So some fun stuff. I actually have some Cancroformis eggs I'm going to experiment with and see if I can get them now that it's cooler. Because they tend to like
Godzilla was formed.
What was that?
That's how Godzilla was formed. Someone just reading it till it got big enough.
Exactly. Well, I guess I looked at the clock and we've already been going more than an hour and we could easily go longer.
Oh.
But I guess I should probably let you go soon. But I wanted to say thank you so much, Jesse, for coming on, talking all about aquatic insect and and other invertebrate tanks, because we've got the
Oh yeah.
snails and we've got the crustaceans and various things going on. It's always a lot of fun, and I just want to help spread the word because they're amazing. People don't realize how cool they are until they see it.
Yeah, I think that because we have so many bugs, and you know, we've been having some people buy, you know, but it's just it needs to be a bigger hobby. Like the bugs are pretty cheap. You can hold like how many beetles can you put in a 10-gallon tank? Like how many desert beetles?
Well, you can put a decent number, but I would probably not put more than like 20 in a 10-gallon.
Yeah, you could put like 200 aquatic insects in a 10-gallon tank, and you wouldn't even know.
Right. You'd
Like
have
they would
plenty
just
of
they're
space
just
left
doing their
over.
thing. Yeah,
Right.
and it's
Right.
amazing, and
And
it's just cool. It's
and I do
easy,
love the desert communals, but a desert communal is usually most active like in the evening, maybe in the early morning. But
right?
an aquatic communal is active
It's all
24/7.
day,
It
it's
does
day and
not
night,
matter.
and on top of that, you have different layers. You know, we were talking about
Hmm.
the layers in the tank. You know, where you have
Yeah.
top layer whirligigs and all those things, and you have the middle layer of all the backswimmers, and you have the bottom layer, and then the diving beetles kind of go throughout all of it. You know, you have all of these layers of the tank, which is just so cool. And it's just
Yeah.
easy. You just get your tank set up, throw them in there, and feed them occasionally. That's really all you got to do. Like,
Right.
it's not
Right. It
hard.
is. If anyone out there hasn't tried it yet, you can do it. And keep in mind that the scale is up to you. If you want to do it with 125 gallons, go for it. It would be awesome. If all
Make
you
me super
have is
jealous.
room
Yeah,
for like a 1 gallon tank, then you have fewer bugs, but you can do it.
you can do
There's a
it.
setup for you. There's a community you can do in a 1 gallon tank that will be fine. So and anywhere in between. So whatever works for you. Figure out your space requirements, and you can talk to bugs in cyberspace and say, this is my tank. This is what I want to do. What do you recommend? And they can have some ideas for
Yeah, shoot Peter an email. You know, I'll put him on blast. Shoot him an email,
you.
or reach out to me. You can reach out to me online too. I'll let you know. You know,
Yeah,
I'm definitely down to chat.
yeah, and they should check out your Instagram too. You post a lot of stuff about those on there. I've seen a lot of posts of those on there.
Yeah,
And you got a lot of,
Peter's been really active on posting about his dirted tanks, by the way,
that's
on
true.
his account as well.
And YouTube
And
now too. He's got some on
and
YouTube
YouTube.
about the dirty
Yeah,
tanks. Yeah,
yeah.
Instagram and YouTube. So good
So,
places to go, good resources.
cool.
And all right, well, thanks, Jesse. Appreciate you coming on, and can't wait till next time.
Yeah, man. We'll chat soon.
All right.
Later.